The BFG, Chapter 11, Journey to Dream Country. After the mad frobscottle party was over, Sophie settled herself again on top of the enormous table. "You is feeling better now?" asked the BFG. "Much better, thank you," Sophie said. "Whenever I is feeling a bit scrotty," the BFG said, "a few gallops of frobscottle is always making me hopscotchy again." "I must say it's quite an experience," Sophie said. "It's a raz-twiddler," the BFG said. "It's glumpurous." He turned away and strode across the cave and picked up his dream catcher net. "I is galloping off now," he said, "to catch some more wopsy whifflin' dreams for my collection. I is doing this every day without missin'. Is you wishin' to come with me?" "Not me, thank you very much," Sophie said. "Not with those giants lurking outside. I is snuggling you very cozy in my pocket of my waistcoat," the BFG said. "There is no one seeing you." Before Sophie could protest, he picked her up off the table and popped her into his waistcoat pocket. There were plenty of room in there. "If you wishin' for a little hole to peep out from?" he asked her. "There's one here already," she said. She had found a small hole in the pocket when she put one eye closed to it. She could see out very well indeed. She watched the BFG as he bent down and filled his suitcase with empty glass jars. He closed the lid, picked up the suitcase in one hand, took the pole with the net at the end of the other hand, and marched toward the entrance of the cave. As soon as he was outside, the BFG set off across the great hot yellow wasteland where the blue rocks lay and the dead trees stood, and where all other giants were skulking about. Sophie, squatting low on her heels in the pocket of leather waistcoat, had one eye glued to the little hole. She saw the group of enormous giants about 300 yards ahead. "Hold your breath," the BFG whispered down to her. "Cross your fingers. Here we go. We is going right past all these other giants. Is you seeing the wompsy great ones, the one nearest us?" "I see him," Sophie whispered back, quivering. "That is the horrible of them all, and the biggest of them all. He is called the flesh-lump-eating giant." "I don't want to hear about it," Sophie said. "He is 54 feet high," the BFG said softly as he jogged along, "and he is swallowing human beings like they is a sugar lump, 2 or 3 at a time." "You're making me nervous," Sophie said. "I is nervous myself," the BFG whispered. "I always gets as jumpy as a jog hopper when the flesh-lump-eater giant is around." "Keep away from him," Sophie pleaded. "Not possible," the BFG answered. "He is galloping easily 2 times as quick as me." "Shall we turn back?" Sophie said. "Timing back is worse," the BFG said. "If they is seen me running away, they is all giving chase and throwing rocks." "They would never eat you, though, would they?" Sophie asked. "Giants is never guzzling other giants," the BFG said. "They is fighting and squirreling a lot with each other, but never guzzling. Human beings is more tasty to them." The giants had already spotted the BFG, and all heads were turned, watching him as he jogged forward. He was aiming to pass well to the right of the group. Through her little peephole, Sophie saw the flesh-lump-eating giant moving up to intercept them. He didn't hurry. He just lopped over casual to point where the BFG would have passed. The others lopped after him. Sophie counted 9 of them altogether, and she recognized the blood bottler in the middle of them. They were bored. They had nothing to do until nightfall. There was an air of menace about them as they looped slowly across the plain with the long, lopping slides, heading for the BFG. "Here comes the runty one," bloomed the flesh-eater. "Ho, ho there, runty one. Where is you splatch wiggling away in such a hefty hurry?" He shot out an enormous arm and grabbed the BFG by the hair. The BFG didn't struggle. He simply stopped and stood quite still and said, "Be so kind as to letting go of my hair, flesh-lump-eater." The flesh-lump-eater released him and stepped back a pace. The other giants stood around him waiting for the fun to start. "Now then, you little grob-squiffer," boomed the flesh-lump-eater. "We is all of us wanting to know where you is galloping off to every day and night. Nobody ought to be galloping off to anywhere until it is getting dark. The human being could easily be spotting you and starting a giant hunt, and we is not wanting that to happen, is we?" "We is not," shouted the other giants. "Go back to your cave, runty one." "I is not galloping to any human being country," the BFG said. "I is going to other places." "I is thinking," said the flesh-lump-eater, "that you is catching human beings and keeping them as pets." "Right you is," cried the blood bottler. "Just now I is hearing you chittering away to one of them in his cave." "You is welcome to go and search my cave from frack to bunt," the BFG answered. "You can go looking into every cook and nanny." There is no human beans or stringy beans or runner beans or jelly beans or any other beans in there. Sophie crouched still as a mouse inside the BFG's pocket. She hardly dared breathe. She was terrified she might sneeze. The slightest sound or movement would give her away. Though the tiny peephole, she watched the giants clustering around the BFG. How revolting they were! All of them had piggy little eyes and enormous mouths with thick sausage lips. When the fresh lump eater was speaking, he got a glimpse of his tongue. It was jet black, like a slab of black steak. Every one of them was more than twice as tall as the BFG. Suddenly, the flesh lump eater shot out two enormous hands and grabbed the BFG around the waist. He tossed him high in the air and shouted, "Catch him, man-hugger!" The man-hugger caught him. The other giants spread out quickly in a large circle. Each giant had 20 yards from his neighbor, preparing for the game they were going to play. Now the man-hugger threw the BFG high and far, shouting, "Catch him, Bone Cruncher!" The Bone Cruncher ran forward and caught the tumbling BFG and immediately swung him up again. "Catch him, child chewer!" he shouted. And so it went on. The giants were playing ball with the BFG, eyeing with each other to see who could throw him the highest. Sophie dug her nails into the sides of the pocket, trying to prevent herself from stumbling out when she was upside down. She felt as though they were in a barrel going over the Niagara Falls, and all the time there was the fearful danger that one of the giants would fail to catch the BFG and he would go crashing to the ground. "Catch him, meat dripper! Catch him, gizzard glumper! Catch him, maid masher! Catch him, blood bottler! Catch him, catch him, catch him!" In the end, they got bored with the game. They dumped the poor BFG on the ground. He was dazed and shattered. They gave him a few kicks and shouted, "Run, you little runt! Let us be seeing how fast you is galloping." The BFG ran. What else could he do? The giants picked up rocks and hurled them after him. He managed to dodge them. "Rudy little runt," they shouted. "Troggy little twit. Swivelly little shrimp. Mucky little midget. Squoggy little squib. Grubby little grub." At last the BFG got clear of them all, and in another couple of minutes the pack of giants was out of sight over the horizon. Sophie popped her head up from the pocket. "I didn't like that," she said. "Phew," said the BFG. "Few and far between. That was in a nasty crouching mood today, was they not? I is sorry you was having such a wiggly time." "No worse than you," Sophie said. "Would they ever really hurt you?" "I isn't ever trusting them," the BFG said. "How do they actually catch the human beings they eat?" Sophie asked. "They usually just stick an arm through the bedroom window and snatching them from their beds," the BFG said. "Like you did to me?" "Ah, but I isn't eating you," said the BFG. "How else do they catch them?" Sophie asked. "Sometimes," the BFG said, "they is swimming in from the sea like fishies, with all their heads showing above the water, and then come out a big hairy hand and grabbled some off the beach." "Children as well?" "Often childers," the BFG said. "Little childers who is building sandcastles at the beach. That is who the swimmelings once are after. Little childers is not so tough to eat as old grandmas. So say the Childwig giant." As they talked, the BFG was galloping fast from the land. Sophie was standing right up in the waistcoat pocket, now holding on to the edge of both hands. Her head and shoulders were in the open, and the wind was blowing in her hair. "How else do they catch people?" she asked. "All of them is having their own special ways of catching human beings," the BFG said. "The meat-dripping giant is preferred to pretend he is a big tree growing in the park. He is standing in the park in the dusty evening, and he is holding great big branches over his head, and there he is waiting until some happy families is coming to have a picnic under the spreading tree. The dripping giant is waiting for them as they lay out their little picnic, but in the end it is the meat dripper who is having the picnic." "Too awful!" Sophie cried. "The gizzard gumpling giant is a city lover," the BFG went on. "The gizzard gumpler is lying high up between the roofs of houses in the big cities. He is lying there snugly as a sniggler and watching the human beings walking on the street below, and when he sees one that looks like it's a wompsy good flavor, he grabs it. He is simply reaching down and snatching it off the street like a monkey taking a nut. He said it is nice to be able to pick and choose what you is having for your supper, he says. It is like choosing from a menu." "Don't people see him doing it?" Sophie asked. "Never is they seeing him. Do not forget it is dusty dark at that time. Also, the gizzard gubbler has a very fast arm. His arm is going up and down quicker than Squinker's. But if all those people are disappearing every night, surely there's some sort of outcry, Sophie said. The world is a whopping big place, the BFG said. It has 100 different countries. The giant is clever. They is careful not to be skidwinkling off the same country too often. They is always swid-fiddling around. Even so, Sophie said. Do not forget, the BFG said, that human beings is disappearing everywhere all the time, even without the giants is guzzling them up. Human beings is killing each other much quicker than the giants is doing. But they don't eat each other, Sophie said. Giants isn't eating each other, the BFG said, nor is giants killing each other. Giants is not very lovely, but they is not killing each other, nor is crocodilinkies killing other crocodilinkies, nor is pussycats killing pussycats. They kill mice, Sophie said. Ah, but they is not killing their own kind, the BFG said. Human beings is the only animal that is killing their own kind. Don't poisonous snakes kill each other, Sophie asked. She was searching desperately for another creature that behaved as badly as the human being. Even poisonous snakes is never killing each other, the BFG said, nor is there famous fearsome creature like tigers or rhinoceros. None of them is ever killing their own kind. Has you ever thought about that? Sophie kept silent. I is not understanding human beings at all, the BFG said. You is a human being, and you is saying it is grisly and horses for giants to be eating people beings, right or left. Right, Sophie said, but human beings is squishing each other all the time, the BFG said. They is shooting guns and going up in aeroplanes to drop their bombs on each other's heads every week. Human beings is always killing other human beings. He was right, of course he was right, said Sophie. She was beginning to wonder whether humans were actually any better than giants. Even so, she said, defending her own race, I think it's rotten that those foul giants should go off every night to eat the human beings. Humans have never done them any harm. That is what the little piggy wig is saying every day, the BFG answered. He is saying, I has never done anything harm to the human being, and so they is eating me. Oh dear, Sophie said. The human being is making rules to suit themselves. The BFG went on. But the rules they is making do not suit the little piggy wiggies. Am I right or left? Right, Sophie said. Giants is always making rules. Their rules is not suiting the human beings. Everybody is making his own rule to suit himself. But you don't like it that those beastly giants are eating human beings every night, do you? Sophie asked. I do not, said the BFG, answering firmly. One right is not making two lefts. Is you quite cozy down there in my pocket? I'm fine, Sophie said. Then suddenly, once again, the BFG went into the magical top gear of his. He began hurling forward with phenomenal leaps. His speed was unbelievable. The landscape became blurred, and again Sophie had to duck down out of the whistling gale to save her head from being blown off her shoulders. She crouched in the pocket and listened as the wind screamed past. It came knifing in through the tiny peephole of the pocket and whooshed around her like a hurricane. But this time the BFG didn't stay at top gear for long. It seemed as though he had some barrier to cross, vast mountain, perhaps an ocean or a great desert. But having crossed it, he once again slowed down to his normal gallop, and Sophie was able to pop her head up and look outside once more at the view. She noticed immediately that they were in an altogether paler country. The sun had disappeared above a film of vapor. The air was becoming cooler every minute. The land was flat and treeless, and there seemed to be no color in it at all. Every minute the mist became thicker, the air became colder still, and everything became paler and paler, until soon there was nothing but gray and white all around them. They were in country of swirling mist and ghostly vapors. There was some sort of grass underfoot, but it was not green. It was ashy gray. There was no sign of living creature and no sound of all except for soft thud of the BFG's footsteps as it hurtled on through the fog. Suddenly he stopped. We is here at last, he announced. He bent down and lifted Sophie from his pocket and put her on the ground. She was still in her nightie and her feet were bare. She shivered and stared around her at the swirling mist and ghostly vapors. Where are we? She asked. We is in dream country, the BFG said. This is where all the dreams are beginning. The BFG, Chapter 10, Frobscottle and Whiz Poppers. By now, Sophie was beginning to feel not only extremely hungry, but very thirsty as well. Had she been at home, she would have finished her breakfast long ago. Are you sure there's nothing else to eat around here except those disgusting, smelly snozcumbers? She asked. Not even a fizzwinkle, answered the BFG. In that case, may I please have a little water, she said. Water, said the BFG, frowning mightily. What is water? We drink it, Sophie said. What do you drink? Frobscottle, announced the BFG. All giants is drinking Frobscottle. Is it as nasty as the SNACSTV, Sophie asked. Nasty, cried the BFG. Never is it nasty. Frobscottle, sweet and jumbly. He got up from his chair and went to the second cupboard. He opened it and took out a glass bottle that must have been 6 feet tall. The liquid inside it was pale green, and the bottle was half full. Here is Frobscottle, he cried, holding the bottle up proud and high, as though it contained some rare wine. Delumptious fizzy Frobscottle, he shouted. He gave it a shake, and the green stuff began to fizz like mad. But look, it's fizzing the wrong way, Sophie cried. And indeed it was. The bubbles, instead of traveling upward and bursting on the surface, were shooting downward and bursting at the bottom. A pale green, frothy fizz was forming at the bottom of the bottle. What on earth is you mean in the wrong way? Asked the BFG. In our fizzy drinks, Sophie said, the bubbles always go up and burst at the top. Upwards is the wrong way, cried the BFG. You mustn't ever be having the bubbles going upwards. That the most flumbunking rubbish I ever is hearing. Why do you say that? Sophie asked. You is asking me why, cried the BFG, waving the enormous bottle around as though he were conducting an orchestra. You is actually meaning to tell me you cannot see why it is a scrawny mistake to have the bubbles flying up instead of down? You said it was flubbunking. Now you say it's scrawny. Which one is it? Sophie said politely. Both, cried the BFG. It is flubbunking and scrawny mistake to let the bubbles go upward. If you can't see why, you must be as quacky as a duckhound. By Ringo, your head must be full of frob squinkers and buzzwanglers. I is frittered if I ever know you can think at all. Why shouldn't the bubbles go upward? Sophie asked. I will explain, said the BFG, but tell me first, what name is you calling your Frobscottle by? One is Coke, said Sophie, another is Pepsi. There are a lot of them. And the bubbles is always going up? They all go up, Sophie said. Catastrophe, cried the BFG. Upgoing bubbles is catastrophic dystrophy. Will you please tell me why? Sophie asked. If you will listen carefully, I will try to explain, said the BFG, but your brain is so full of bug whiffles, I doubt you will ever understand. I'll do my best, Sophie said patiently. Very well, then. When you is drinking that cokey drink of yours, said the BFG, is going straight down your tummy. Is that right or left? It's right, Sophie said. And the bubble is going down into your tummy. Right or left? Right again, Sophie said. And the bubbles is fizzing upward? Of course, Sophie said. Which means, said the BFG, that they will all come swizzling up your throat and out your mouth and make a flowsome, belchy burp. That is often true, Sophie said. But what's wrong with a little burp now and then? It's sort of fun. Burping is feelsome, said the BFG. Us giants is never doing it. But with your drink, Sophie said. What was it you called it? Frobscottle, said the BFG. With Frobscottle, Sophie said, the bubbles in your tummy will be going downward, and that could have a far nastier result. Why nasty, said the BFG, frowning. Because, Sophie said, blushing a little, if they go down instead of up, they'll come out somewhere else, with an even louder and ruder noise. A whiz popper, cried the BFG, beaming at her. Us giants is making whiz poppers all the time. Whiz popping is a sign of happiness. It is music in our ears. You surely is not telling me that a little whiz popping is forbidden among human beings. It is considered extremely rude, Sophie said. But you is whiz popping, is you not, now and again? Asked the BFG. Everyone is whiz popping. That's what you call it, Sophie said. Kings and queens are whiz popping. Presidents are whiz popping. Glamorous film stars are whiz popping. Little babies are whiz popping. But where I come from, it is not polite to talk about it. Redunculous, said the BFG. If everyone is making whiz poppers, then why not talk about it? We is now having a swiggle of delicious Frobscottle, and you will see the happy results. The BFG shook the bottle vigorously. The pale green stuff fizzed and bubbled. He removed the cork and took a tremendous gurgling swig. It's glummy, he cried. For a few moments, the big friendly giant stood quite still, and a look of absolute ecstasy began to spread over his long, wrinkly face. Then suddenly, The heavens opened, and he let fly with a series of loudest and rudest noises Sophie had ever heard in her life. They reverberated around the walls of the cave like thunder, and the glass jars rattled and the shelves. But most astonishing of all, the force of the explosion actually lifted the enormous giant clear off his feet like a rocket. "Whoopee!" he cried when he came down to earth again. "Now that's whiz-popping for you." Sophie burst out laughing. She couldn't help it. "Have some yourself," cried the BFG, tipping the neck of the enormous bottle towards her. "Don't you have a cup?" Sophie said. "No cups, only bottle." Sophie opened her mouth, and very gently the BFG tipped the bottle forward and poured some of the fabulous frobscottle down her throat. And oh my gosh, how delicious it was. It was sweet and refreshing. It tasted of vanilla and cream and just the faintest trace of raspberries on the edge of the flavor. And the bubbles were wonderful. Sophie could actually feel them bouncing and bursting around in her tummy. It was an amazing sensation. It felt as though hundreds of tiny people were dancing a jig inside her, tickling her with their toes. It was lovely. "It's lovely," she cried. "Just wait," said the BFG, flapping his ears. Sophie could feel the bubbles travel lower and lower to her tummy, and then suddenly, inevitably, the explosion came. The trumpet sounded, and she made the walls of the cavern ring in the sound of music and thunder. "Bravo!" shouted the BFG, waving the bottle. "You is very good for beginner. Let's have some more."